Hello and welcome to my retro watches, and what a watch I've got for you guys today. Possibly the best watch that's crossed my bench on or off camera all year. As a Seiko fan, this is one of those really iconic watches. It is, of course, the Seiko Willard, made famous by Captain Willard, who wore it in the film Apocalypse. Now, this is a one owner from new from 1974. Reference is 61058110. This watch has an interesting story how it came into my possession, but an even more interesting story about its history and where it's been up until now. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then stay tuned, because we're going to get really close up in just a few seconds. Now, this is going to be a very sympathetic, and I mean very sympathetic, restoration. The watch at the moment is not running. The hands do turn, the date will change, the bezel will turn too. So hopefully it's just something basic inside. Maybe it needs a service. Maybe there's some parts broken. We'll find out as we go along. But I'm not going to touch the case. And I'm not going to touch the bezel, because every mark on this watch has been well earned. I will, however, change the crystal. We need to see that dial in all its glory underneath, because on these 6105s the dial is everything, and I'm anticipating that this one is in very, very good condition, and I can't wait to get it out the case to have a look. So stay tuned. The macro lens is coming out. We're going to get close up and we're going to see what's inside this watch. So let's get this started and get the most important bit out of the way. How good is that dial? So the crown just pulls out on these. I've already loosened the case back. Thrown it across the desk. Okay, so the movement looks really, really clean. So the moment of truth, we're going to flip this over, see how good or bad that dial is. I'm pretty excited at this point. Okay, here we go. Ooh, okay, that's not too bad. There is a little bit of loom rot I can see at the 12, just up here, a little bit at 6. There is some staining on the dial, or some debris on the dial. I don't know what that is. It's not coming off with Roddy coat. I'll have to have a look at that later on, perhaps under the microscope. The hands have got a little bit of tarnish on them, so it could indicate that perhaps a slight water ingress. When I tell you the story about this watch in a moment, that will make a bit of sense. Also just noticed, if I bring that in, you can see that black thing is, well, a failed gasket by the looks of it, or a gasket that is failing on the crystal. Once again, that makes a bit of sense to me, knowing what this has been doing. So let's get the hands off, strip the movement down, see if we can get it going. Those hands are really stuck tight. I'm going to refit the crown and try and turn them. Now that was one loud click to get those off, so I do wonder straight away whether that might be some of the problem. Okay, while I strip down this movement, I'll begin the story about how this watch is now on my bench today. So in August 2022, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Many of you subscribers already know that, of course, and I went for surgery to have my prostate removed. And I was very nervous. I arrived at the hospital at 7 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't allowed any family visitors or anything. They eventually found me a bed, and I was sitting in this ward with another chap and a few other guys. I was really scared and nervous, and the guy opposite me realised this and struck up a conversation. His name was Keith Yates, and he'd had his operation the day before. He had an operation on his thyroid, and he was really friendly, and it was very interesting. And he was telling me the story that the night before, the person in my bed was an ex-Formula 1 driver from many years ago. And I told him how much of a Formula 1 fan I was, and that was unbelievable. But also there was I think there was a police constable or something that was also a private investigator and done some work for some of the Bee Gees. And these guys had sat up half the night after their operation telling stories, and it was fascinating to hear all this. But of course, me and Keith then started our own proper conversations. We talked about family, we talked about our interests. Keith's interests in particular were guitars, and I've got a lot of interest in guitars too. So we talked about that, and then of course with me, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about watches. I can't help myself. Any opportunity, I will bring the conversation up. So we started talking about watches. I said I've got this YouTube channel. I really have a passion for Seikos, certainly 70s Seikos. And then Keith said, well, it's funny you should say that. I've got a Seiko that I wore many years ago, but it doesn't run now. It's been in a drawer for decades. So I discussed what this one might be. He told me that he was a saturation diver and he used it for diving. So I thought, well, it has to be something pretty clever. So I showed him a picture of the Willard just in case, because you never know. And sure enough, that's the watch it was. So Keith had bought an original Willard and didn't know the significance of, or the importance of these to Seiko collectors of today. So I'm going to tell you more about Keith's story in just a moment. So I'm pretty confident now that I've found why it's not running. Those hands were difficult to come off, and we have some rust just at the top. Not sure whether my camera is really going to pick that up because it's really small, but that rust is going to be a problem because that means the center wheel with the seconds pivot is not going to come out very easily. We'll see though, you never know. But this is a fault that I've seen in many watches, certainly Seikos. Certainly if they've had any water getting in or condensation, the condensation can sort of gather in the center of the crystal and drip onto the hands, I think, and it just gets into this bit here, rusts it up, and then that's it. It's going to stop. So it could mean that already I'm looking for some parts. We'll disassemble the other side, see first of all whether we can get the wheel out, because that might be a problem. I might just put a little bit of oil on that now actually, just to see if it might help to penetrate in just a little. Figured I'd best show you this on the microscope too, so you can see the center second hand pivot there. And if we turn it to one side, of course the rust is pretty evident there, lots of it, certainly over that center wheel, as a center wheel pivot or tube if you like. So there we go, just try and clean a little bit off. It's a bit of pegwood. I think it's coming off quite easily, which gives me a lot of hope actually that it's not going to be completely seized, because if they are, then you ruin everything trying to remove them. So go at it with a pair of tweezers now as well, just to see. It is all very loose, which is a good sign. When they are seized like that, certainly if the center wheel gets seized to the fourth wheel, which is the second hand's pinion, that fourth wheel has to be removed from the movement first, and makes it very difficult because you'll end up breaking the wheel. The only way to get it out of the movement, unless we can soften that rust. So I will put some oil on it anyway and see if any of that will penetrate. Here we go. And hopefully that is going to do the trick. Right, I'm going to keep stripping the movement down, so pay close attention to see if that fourth wheel will come out okay, because I want to carry on telling the story of Keith, because it's absolutely fascinating. So in February 1974, I was only 2 years old, Keith joined the Royal Navy. By December of that year, he had qualified as a clearance diver, which meant, I guess, that he was diving underwater and clearing mines and other dangerous obstacles, which is an insanely crazy career path to choose, in my opinion. But hey, you know, some people like that kind of work. He actually said that the more senior divers were actually given omegas as part of their passing out parade, but for the lower ranks such as Keith, he had to fend for themselves. On qualifying, Keith was sent to the Fastlane nuclear submarine base up in Scotland, where he stayed there for 3 months, and then he had to join the HMS Hubbardson to join the diving team that was bound for the Suez Canal, and their job was to sweep, do a final sweep before reopening the canal after the 1967 war with Israel. On the way down to the Suez, the first stop the boat made was in Gibraltar, and that's where Keith decided to buy his first proper diving watch, and Seikos were the watch of choice back then, as they possibly are today, who knows. And he paid 32 UK pounds, which he said was roughly about a week's wages back then, and that equates to, if inflationary terms for to 2022-23, it's about £300 to £400. So again, the same sort of thing in dollars, $360 to $420 maybe. So a pretty decent investment by any stretch. Keith then used this watch for his job in the Royal Navy right up until 1978 when he left. And in that time, of course, he was using it underwater. He was welding, he was burning, and all the military work that he was having to do. So every scratch that you can see on the crystal and on the bezel is being earned in action, doing what this watch is supposed to do, and that's what makes it so incredible. We all like dive watches, but hardly any of us use a watch for its purpose. And here is a guy that I met in hospital who was genuinely using the most iconic, probably Seiko, or one of the most iconic Seikos there is, for what it's been made for. What Keith then actually went on to say is in 1978 he then left the Royal Navy. He became a saturation diver, which is even more intense because they go underwater for weeks at a time, or at least under pressure for weeks at a time, working on the oil rigs or on the pipelines and things like that. So it was incredible. I didn't know anything about this sort of work. I didn't realize that divers would stay underwater or stay pressurized for weeks on end to maximize obviously the amount of time that they could work, and how traumatic that must be on your life, living at those depths and at those pressures. Absolutely crazy. One thing Keith did say though, in 1978 he claims that the watch was taken off. He then bought a Rolex Submariner double red. I'll put a photo of it up now, which he then used, I guess, for his next part of his work. And wow, what a watch to actually replace the Seiko with, because that one is stratospheric in its price nowadays. And I'm sure Keith didn't buy either of these watches with investments in mind at all. They were just functional purpose tools for the job. And that's what makes this story absolutely so incredible. Keith is going to become a good friend of mine now. I've spoken to him time and time again through my recovery. He likes to see how I'm getting on, and I like to see how he's getting on. And what a friendship to have made under such strange circumstances. And Keith, I know you'll be watching this. I have to thank you again for what you did on the day to make my life just that little bit easier, rather than sitting there being completely terrified. And look what's come out of it. I've been able to make a video on an iconic watch, and I've also got to meet you and to be able to tell your story for everybody on YouTube. So how about that? Thank you very much, Keith, and thank you everybody for listening to Keith's story. Let's get on with the rest of this video. So there you go, movement stripped. This is the case back, and no service marks at all. Keith did think that he never got it serviced. That would explain why certainly the barrel was very difficult to get out. So we'll unwind the main spring, just check a few of those components on the microscope as well. This is the centre wheel, and you can quite clearly see the rust there, certainly at the top in particular, and then up by the wheel. So if we just turn it over, see if there's any more on the other side, see if it's penetrated all the way through, and yes, it has. Not so severe on that side, but there we go. Let's look at the fourth wheel pinion. That's the pinion that the second hand sits on. It runs all the way through the movement. There we go. Lots and lots of rust. And that's probably had it, to be honest with you. It'll clean off, it might be usable, but we'll see. This is the train wheel bridge. That's the bearing for the barrel at the top. There's a lot of wear there as well. You can see it's down to the brass. And then on the main plate as well, lots and lots of very dried grease. So that's oil that's turned into a powder, which in turn has probably pretty much seized the movement. Time to inspect the parts, and you can see here that the fourth wheel pinion there, the rust is still on, and the rust is also going to be on the centre wheel that you'll see in a minute. And I've done a lot of research to try and change these parts over, because Seiko's really good. You can swap parts from different movements as long as you've got the right parts list to work from, and I've got plenty of those on my website, so please go and look over there and you can research from one movement to another. And I found that the centre wheel and that fourth wheel are compatible from a 6119C movement. I've got loads of those, and as you can see, these are the replacements that look all nice and clean. It's very easy to do. It just takes a bit of time and effort. You've got to think it's a 6 series movement, so I'll therefore look at other 6 series data sheets. This is the barrel bearing on the main plate, and as you can see, it's slightly ovaled, very typical on these Seikos. Now you can put a jewel in that, I'm just not skilled enough to do so. And that's the train wheel bridge, also the barrel bearing, and you can see that brass rubbing as well there. So not perfect, but not something I can fix easily to my skill level just yet, but wait and see. Maybe I'll learn that in the future very soon. And here we go, using my mainspring winders. Some of you have commented in other videos previously that I don't service the mainsprings. Well, I do, I just don't always film it. It's not easy to film, it's not exactly all that terribly interesting at the end of the day either, but it's a job that we have to do, of course. And there we go, it's installed. Okay, it's time to rebuild the watch, and I've got a pretty good feeling that it's going to run now. Only those 2 parts really that have got any rust on, and of course I've changed them over. Now I've also moved indoors. Now normally I do all my builds at my bench in my garage, but it's really cold out there, and I'm tired of freezing my Jacob's crackers in the garage, so I've moved myself indoors and I've got tools all over the place. So this should make for a little bit more interesting movie making, at least for me. So here we go. Let's start off with oiling the center jewel with just a little bit of 9010. And then we can place the new wheel in like so. That's no problem at all. And then I like to put just another small drop on the top. And then we get the bridge on. And a bit of the dreaded Seiko S4 grease for the barrel arbor. Now it looks horrible stuff, but it is actually very good. It's quite runny, and of course it's a Seiko grease for a Seiko watch, so what can go wrong? Just remembered. So the hacking lever, and I think I will oil just where it pivots. It possibly isn't necessary, and I'm not following the manual. I can't find a manual for the 6105, although it is really a 6106. It's pretty much the same movement. So I'll go into this in a bit more detail, but essentially that acts as a bit of a lever. The clutch is going to sit on there and it's going to actuate this to move over and touch the escape wheel from memory. So I'll just pop in the escape next. And of course the joy of Seiko for me is it's really easy territory. I've worked on so many. They are still my favourites in many respects. It's where I started, and I love them for that. They're very simplistic, very robust, great if you're getting into this as a hobby because they're plentiful. Of course this particular model of watch is iconic, but the movement is still really similar to all the other Seiko movements, and of course this movement was in other models as well, so it's not like it's bespoke for this particular watch, which makes it expensive. You can pick one of these up probably from Speed Timer Collection or on his eBay account, probably for £20–30, something like that, for one of these movements, I would have thought. Okay, that's essentially the train in. We can try and put the bridge on. Not always the easiest of things on this sort of movement, and case in point, the escape wheel is not seated in the jewel. And it is now. You can see it now spinning. So I'll keep my finger just gently pressed and then get some of the screws in. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with that. To me it feels just like it's not spinning as loosely as I would like, but that could be just deceptive. We'll get the ratchet wheel on and we'll give it a bit of wind and see what the train does then. So I need to fit the click. Just putting a little smidge of D5 where I'm about to put the ratchet wheel. And there we go, with some wind in it. It's making a pretty healthy noise to me. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Train is good. So we can get the escape in and then the balance and make sure that this watch is going to run. Now I normally fit the pallet fork under the microscope, so without the microscope to hand makes it a little bit more challenging, but still doable. It's really easy to break a pivot on the pallet fork. I've done it many times before. It's critical that you get it in the right position. So now if we put some wind in, get my clean oiler. That's going to be good to go. Oh, right, the moment of truth. Fit the balance. And this is the bit that I always like the most. These 6 series Seikos as well have a massive balance wheel, which is usually, and I say usually, quite easy to fit. Well, it wasn't as easy to fit as it normally is, but it's running. There you go, you can see it beating away. It's interesting, it probably isn't coming across on camera all that well. There's a lot of discoloration on the balance cock here, and no explanation for that really. It was already there to start with. There's a lot of strange discoloration on this movement compared to other ones that I've seen of this age, and I don't know, it must be just the conditions it's been in. Perhaps all the pressure underwater has caused it, who knows. But there we go, that is a result. I can also tell just by looking at that, if you just spin it around you might be able to see it better. That is beating lovely, nice and fast. So at the moment I'd be confident enough to say I don't even need to put it on the Timegrapher to double check it. Of course we'll need to oil all the pivots, and perhaps I will do some of that on the microscope in a little bit. Definitely good though, seeing the movement beating on its own, probably for the first time in decades I would have thought, and problem is definitely solved. So the rest of it should be straightforward. Normally I build the dial side now, but I'm thinking I might just try and put the automatic framework on the top while we're still here. That is all the automatic works, so what causes it to wind the mainspring by using the rotor. So this is the automatic framework plate, and I need to put a bit of D5, a bit of a thicker oil just by that post there, and the reason for that is we have the magic fingers or the pawl lever. This is a brilliant thing from Seiko. When you've worked on enough Swiss watches, certainly from the 60s and 70s, and you see how they figured out how to wind, you know, have an automatic winding movement, Seiko just simplified it completely with this simple thing here, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail in a bit. I've just got a sneaking suspicion I've got that the wrong way round through talking. There we go, because we've got a hole. I don't know if this is going to come through on camera. There's a hole here and a hole here, and that helps you when you're actually putting the wheel on. Right, it's sort of in the jaw. What tends to happen is that the teeth of the pawl lever need to go on the wheel and grip it, and it never wants to do it straight away, and that's why you've got those little holes, because you can then manipulate it once you've got the guard on. And this is the guard here, and that's just held in by two really small screws. They're the smallest screws on this movement, and I'll just do those off camera. So the screws are now in, and I've already done it, but you just can move that arm on and off the gear like so. We can't see the other one from where we are, but if we flipped it over, certainly on the movement when it's fitted, you can just get into these two little access holes and just make sure the teeth of the pull are engaged with the teeth with the winding wheel there. So that's ready to go onto the movement. So we just want a little bit of D5 on the hole, and then before we try and fit the plate, just need to oil a few of the pivots. And you might notice that some of these pivots are just metal on metal. There's not a jewel inside. And now that's in the right spot, I can put the screws in, and then we'll check to make sure that that ratchet wheel is working properly. So now the screws are in, all I have to do is just give the turn of the mainspring, and you will see this wheel here, the ratchet wheel, is going round. And that means everything is in place. Now we do need to oil those, and I will do that, but it'll be done on the microscope. It's really easy to put oil all over the place trying to get in there. So I might film that in a bit when I get access to the microscope, but for the time being we'll just flip the movement over, and we're going to start on the dial side. So here we go with the keyless. First thing to go in is the clutch. Now you will notice this is the hacking lever, that little brass bit sticking up, and you have to get the clutch in a position where the hacking lever is in that sort of slot there, like that. Don't do that, it's not going to work at all. We're certainly not going to hack. Then I'm just going to try to apply, I should have known that was going to happen, apply a bit of the grease. High friction, keyless works, requires a thicker oil and grease. That's for the set-in lever. Now, I'm really not good with this grease at all, but I wanted to try and get some on the mating faces here. It's going to look a little bit ugly, but I'd rather it look ugly and work than not have any grease on it at all. So we now have this interesting part here. And that is all to do with the quick set functions. And I've oiled these pivots here and in between them. Did that off camera. It's really difficult. It looks very much like a part that you see on the 6309 Seikos, and also the recent one that I did on the bullhead. So we've now got to fit the spring. So I'm stuck because I can't quite remember. I think the spring has to rest on this thing, and then the tension part, the long part on the yoke itself. I'm going to have to consult the disassembly video. Can't quite remember. It's not loading on anything, that spring in there. That must have to go onto this. That is an absolute nuisance. And now putting the Rodico in the way has pulled up the set-in lever. Oh. So the whole keyless now is in a whole heap of disarray. This is all for your viewing pleasure, I have to say. Don't worry about my anxiety and stress levels over trying not to lose that spring. Okay, I'm going to have to reassemble all that bit just again. Yes. Yes. Quick. Get the set-in lever spring on before it all shoots out. you wouldn't put money on it. The yoke is now sticking up out of the clutch and all is a mess because I can't get the set and lever spring over the little thing it needs to be over there because of that. Oh, I've just got that spring right as well. I'm just trying to see if I could manipulate it, but oh, well, we all heard the click. I do need to grease that, and I do need also to fit that little component up here as well that holds it all in place. Right, let's do that first, shall we? And I've just suddenly thought that might have all been off camera. Ah! But alas, there is problems. Anybody see what it is? The movement is not hacking, so it all has to come apart yet again after all that. Oh no, I spoke too soon. Oh, this is turning into a right nightmare, and Seikos are never a nightmare. Right, there we go. So I just didn't get to the third position. So you can just see, hopefully, the balance is spinning there. So we have first position, should be the quick set. Pull it out again, and there we are, we're in hacked, and that's when we're going to be able to change the hands. Movement keeps coming out the holder, so there we go. Going to secure that, put the date assembly on, and then that's the movement complete. Just all the train pivots, and this one is the escape, so of course we don't want to touch the escape at all. Then we can use a little tiny bit of D5 on a few other places in preparation. Now for the centre, I'm just going to put a drop of 9010 and then a nice drop of D5 on the side of the wheel there, and that's for the cannon pinning. Minute wheel, and the date wheel, and that's the only plastic part, the intermediate wheel. Now that's in, we can successfully test this function. So that's going to be to set the time, and that feels nice and smooth, it's not stiff, so the cannon pinion is well lubricated and everything is good there. Drop the hour wheel on, and then the top cover plate where the calendar works. So pretty much the last component. I don't know, it just doesn't look right to me, that, but I guess it must be. So we can test it. As you can see, quick set works absolutely fine. And then you'll be able to see how this works. There's a little tooth here sticking out called a finger. That is going to mesh with the teeth on the date wheel, and as you can see, this is in normal time, so as the time we're ticking over, it clicks over, and that is as simple as that. So you have two different mechanisms. You've got one to check, you know, to change at 12, should I say, and then your quick set. So if you ever have problems with watches that it's not working on quick set or it's not working at 12, it's rare you're going to have problems with both of them at the same time. You can deduce where the problem might be. But there we go. The movement is now complete. It's running. We'll put it on the Timegrapher. We'll have a look at that first. Then we need to get on to having a look at the dial, see if we can clean that up a little bit. Also the hands. And then it's a case of putting it in the case. How about that? And change gaskets, all that sort of stuff. So stay tuned. We'll be back for more in just a moment. Well, here we are, next day, back on the normal bench and looking at the Timegrapher. It is an absolute disaster. Now I have to say, I fully wound the mainspring, put it on here probably about 4 or 5 hours ago, and the amplitude was 200, the rate was 0, the beat error was I think 0.2, but the trace wasn't great. It had a bit of noise on it. But here we are 4 hours later, and it's very concerning actually. That's not good at all. Bit disappointed, but I think also because I was building it indoors, different light conditions, and I haven't edited the video at all yet. So I'm wondering whether a stray fibre or something has just got in there and mucked things up a little bit. I have oiled the shock jewel on the balance, which is something I was going to do in the video, but wanted to just see if that would resolve the trace, and of course it's done nothing at all. I'm tempted to take it off and try and wind it just to see if that makes any difference again. I've also seen lots of positional error as well, which you wouldn't really see with this sort of trace, I don't think. So let's just try and wind it, and that will be more than fully wound. But no, we've still got a really dodgy trace. Let's just see. Different positions. It's making no odds at all, is it? So I don't know. The parts, when I inspected them, seemed fine. Initially, when I put the balance on in the video, everything was good. Again, the balance looks like it's spinning better than it would suggest. So I think the best thing for me to do really is just take it apart and re-clean it and possibly resurface the whole thing. Yeah, we're getting a bit more of a... No, I spoke too soon. I suddenly thought we're getting a better trace. If I come across something, I'll put it on film. Certainly if it's a stray fibre or something as obvious as that. But failing that, it might be just that I've done something, like I say, wrong in the service. I can't see what that would be. So stay tuned. You'll find out, hopefully, in just a few seconds. So I think I might have found the problem. This is the centre wheel, and this was also a donor wheel. And you can just see all this debris. I don't know if I can get in there with the tweezers. So all that sort of black stuff there, I don't know where it's come from, because this did go through a cleaning process, albeit just through the ultrasonic. See how it's all bunching up in there, look. So I've got a feeling that is possibly what's been causing some drag on the movement. That particular wheel that you can see there, or that spline in the middle, goes on to the barrel. So maybe some of that's scattered around a bit more in places. That there is a scratch, because I already thought that was a hair. The escape, well, the escape looks fine to me. So unfortunately it means I've got to strip the dial side now as well, just to get the cannon pinion off to get that wheel out. But we'll give it another clean through the machine. The other thing is, that is the grease that I put on the barrel arbor, well, the barrel arbor bearing, and clearly I've put on too much, and I'm not too sure whether that'd be causing much of a problem, but it would in times to come. So I'll clean that and make it look a bit more presentable. Now also, now taking the escape wheel out, that is the jewel, and that is some debris or something. So you're going to get all the mistakes with me as they happen. I am just a hobbyist like the rest of you. There's nothing special about me. That looks like it's on the dial side as well. So we'll clean that off as well, just to be 100% sure that everything is as good as it's going to be. Okay, the watch has been cleaned and rebuilt and re-oiled, and I work a lot better when I've not got the camera in the way. I'm on my bench as well with proper lighting. So I've actually just regulated the watch a little bit as well to tidy it up. So you're going to see the results. Let's get it going now. And immediately you can see straight away it's a lot more improved. We've got no beat error now. A better amplitude, just crept over 200. 200 is acceptable. Anything better than that is good. I'd like to have seen 210, 15, something like that really. Rate is okay. What I tend to do now is just keep it in 4 positions for 2 minutes each, or just let the Timegrapher run and just see the error variation, because you can see there already on that trace there is something not quite right still in this movement. I think a wheel may be slightly worn or something. We do get a bit of wobble. So let's just kick it off in this position. We'll run it, like I say, for 2 minutes and see what we get at the end of that. So there we go, that is the 8-minute test. You saw that it drops off in the 2 stressful positions. I can't exactly call it crown up and crown down because of the way I've got the movement in the holder. I do also surmise that some of this might clear up a little bit when it's in the case rather than resonating through the movement holder there. I've seen that happen before. I do also wonder whether the slight wear to the barrel arbor bearing on the main plate may be just giving it a slight oscillation, and that's what's showing some of the error. Some of the static you can see now clearly is through me talking, to be honest with you. I'm going to have to call it a win. It is 48 years old, this watch. I'd love to see a nice straight line. That's what all watchmakers want, and perhaps I could get there with a bit more digging, but this video is probably going to be over an hour already, and it could go on for 2 or 3 hours if I was to completely continue to fault find that forever. So here we are with the dial, and honestly there's not much, if anything, I'm going to do on this. It's too risky in many respects to damage it. There is already a very sort of light scratch here that you probably don't see on camera, but I can see it from the angle I'm at, and I'm at a loss to how that's got there because I don't think it was there to start with. And I've only just got it out of its protective case that I put it in, and I know this watch hasn't been serviced before either, so it is, I don't know, hard to say. There are some watermarks, which I guess is from where the breach has happened, and the best thing to use is just Rodico and a new piece of Rodico as well, but I don't think water stains are going to come off with that either. It doesn't seem to be doing anything at all as I'm dabbing it there. And the risk is if you try and use some chemicals or some water or something else, it might get it up, but then again it might not, and it might ruin it. And this watch is just too iconic to mess around. We have got some loom rot where the moisture's just got into the loom and sent it a bit funny. This has also gone onto the metal here, and if I'm lucky with a bit of pegwood, I can probably just take a little bit of that off. I can see it coming off there now, but the plating or whatever is on these surrounds. That'll be corrosion. We could put that on the microscope really and have a closer look at it. And anyone asks me, and they have before, you know, what's the best way to clean dials, I always say don't. You're just gonna, unless you really know what you're doing, if you ruin a dial, you will be gutted for many, many months, if not years. It's the one thing you look at a watch more than anything else. So don't mess it up trying to think you're going to improve it, because 9 times out of 10, you're not. So here we are looking at the hands as well, and they've had the same problem with that condensation really. So I'm just going to use that pen and see if that's going to buff them up a little bit. Normally it does. It's never perfect, it's not going to bring them right back, but it'll take some of that tarnish off. There's a lot of loom rot just in here, and I just fear for wiping away some of this watch's history, to be honest with you. You know, provenance is everything. This watch has been used for what it was designed for, and therefore it holds a little bit more value for that reason, really. Aesthetically, it tells a story. So literally that's kind of all I want to do with that. Just a light rub, just to bring it up a little bit, get rid of some of it. Equally, I'll do the same with the minute hand and the second hand. The second hand I've got just here. It's a shame really, because we've got more loom rot around the end, and certainly where the red pip would be. I'm actually going to put those on the microscope in a minute. We can have I'll just show you a bit more about what I mean by loom rot. Here we go to see it tick for the very first time. Never gets old, but it's fouled. It's fouled on the heel of the hand. Oh. Now there is a problem with these hands, and that is because they were so rusted when they came off. They have been bent ever so slightly with the force that was used to get them off. So it looks like I've got to manipulate them, but never mind, I'll do that, and then I'll put them under the microscope and I'll show you that loom rot. So here we are looking at the first piece of loom rot. We call it loom rot really, but it's pretty obvious there that it's the rust from the moisture it's got onto the surround and infected it, as you can see it here. But the hands under the microscope are awful. There's no other way to use it. I've just hacked the movement. So here's the second hand, and yes, how sad. That's what water ingress does to you if it's left for a long time. And you can see my sort of attempts at trying to make them shine, pretty fruitless, and in fact there it's ever so slightly marked it. These hands are really past it, I suppose. They're functional, and when you see it with the naked eye, as we do some shots later on, it's not as noticeable as that. But my dilemma now is, do I keep those on? I mean, it should try and keep everything, you know, as authentic as possible, but you can now buy, you know, aftermarket hands for this. Perhaps because the dial is so nice that it might just lift it to have a better pair of hands. You leave your comments below. I think most of you are going to say no, leave these ones on. I just don't know what to say really. They are well past it. Even if I took all of the loom out and was able to then remove some of that rust, I guess in theory you could try and replate them, but that is quite a task, and I don't know yet how to polish hands, and I could make more of a mess than is worth it. So there we go, that is what loom rot is all about. There was some just down here as well, as ever so slightly. So again, you can see it's taken off the coating off the surround, got to the bare metal, and you know, oxidization has set to. But you know, This watch was used underwater at great depths, and as a result you are always going to have a risk of one of the gaskets blowing and letting in just that little bit of water, which is clearly what's happened here. But never mind, tells a story at the end of the day. So I've cleaned the case, I'll put the rehaut in. I've got a new gasket for a new crystal. These gaskets are called L-shaped gaskets, and you can get them on the internet. There's a lot of people selling the right ones for this particular watch, and it's an L shape because it's just got the side wall, if you like. The crystal will sit inside. Now I have to say, you can't really see it, maybe you can, there's something magical about that old crystal. It's full of scratches, it's got some like chips that could be weld splatter. Tells all the story of that watch. However, I still think it needs a new piece of glass, and fortunately there are still replacement ones available. They are aftermarket. I think if you're to find an original Seiko one, you're doing well, and you'll pay a lot of money for it. These crystals are really thick. It's thick glass, so I need to press it down so I know the gasket's all the way around it. And then we have the other metal ring, if you remember me prying this off. Now it has got, not sure if I can get that in the film for you, there's a slot at the top here. It's a slight indentation, and you need to make sure you're orientating that there at the top, so you can at least lever it off again should you ever need to change it. So I'm going to set that up properly, get the press out, and just push that back on. So next to fit is the bezel, just the same thing, just press it on. Now the bezel does have a gasket, you can just see it in that little gap there. And I'll confess, it hasn't turned up yet. I've ordered a replacement gasket for this, and also for the case back, which sits in a little recess there. They were both very hard. I took that one out, left this one in. We've got a lot of postal strikes in the UK, so I'm not anticipating it for another week. And to be fair, I don't want to hang around. Let's get this video completed. But rest assured, these gaskets will certainly be changed. The only one I won't change is the one in the crown, and that is because it's extremely tricky. Google that, have a look on YouTube. There's another guy, the Seikoologist, I think his name is. He's doing a video, basically you stuff a load of gaskets inside the hole to pop open a lid in order to get at it. It seems quite involved, and maybe I'll do that in another video at some point. But for now, let's just press this bezel back on, get the movement in, and show you the finished watch, because I'm really excited about that bit. Quick word from today's sponsor, it's unlimitedstraps.com. Guys, there'll be a link in the description box below. Please click that, bookmark that website, because it's going to go live mid-January. They're going to specialise in aftermarket Seiko straps, straps for Omega, and straps for Tudor, and bracelets, of course. Now the guy's called Martin. He runs Uncle Seiko UK, which is not affiliated to the American brand, and he's an absolute Seiko nut just like myself. I told him all about this Willard that I was restoring, and he offered to send me this waffle strap to suit the watch. And my word, what a strap it is. Let's just have a closer look. You can see we've got some texture here. This is going to suit this watch absolutely perfect. The attention to detail in this is astonishing, because I have got a different version, a very cheap version I might add. AliExpress one probably cost me £5. I've had for quite a few years now, and you just compare the two. There is no comparison, is there? If you're going to have a really good vintage Seiko, you don't want to put something like this on it. You want to spend the money and put something much better. This is going to look fantastic on the watch. Really, really appreciate Martin sending that in, and I can only wish him all the best with his new website. So please, again, check it out, bookmark it. I'm sure he's going to have some introductory offers when he goes live. And here it is, the moment we've all been waiting for, me especially. It's on my wrist. There you go. The genuine Seiko Willard It's now running well and true. It is a big watch, but then of course it would be, especially over a wetsuit. But just look at it here. Every one of those scratches, dents and marks have been put in doing what this watch was supposed to be doing in the first place. It's a tool watch by design, designed to be taken underwater and used for diving, and that's exactly what Keith did. And he took this to some great depths, no doubt, as well, and it stood up to the test of time until unfortunately that little bit of moisture has finally got in and been left in there long enough for it to affect the hands and then the movement. But believe it or not, this watch has still got a little bit of lume left in it. Bit of a dazzle there from the UV pen, but it does glow, look. However, it fades right in front of your eyes. I'm literally doing this as I talk, and yes, the second hand you can barely see, and it fades to nothing, probably within a minute or so. It's disappointing, but then 48 years of usage, that's what you're going to get. However, I think this watch is full of character, it's full of charm, it's got a story, it's historic, it's a vintage watch. Although, is it a vintage watch because it's 2 years younger than I am, and it's even younger than Keith is? Does that make us vintage? Oh, that's a crisis all on its own. Anyway, I've really enjoyed this one. I hope you like looking at the finished watch there ticking away nicely. Certainly do wonder about those hands all the same, but the chance to work on this watch has been a real privilege. So with that in mind, let's cut back to the bench and get my final thoughts. Okay guys, that's the end of this video, and what a video it's been. It's taken over a month to shoot this one and edit it. I've put my all into it, so I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, then please smash that like button. If all of you hit the like button, it would change my life. Honestly, it would make the channel grow, which is what it's all about. Certainly leave your comments below, read every one, try to reply to as many as I can. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say, certainly about the hands, whether I should change them or not. I think I know what you're going to say. But what a watch and what a journey this has been. You know, from meeting Keith in the hospital, it's so profound, really. You know, of all the people to meet, one, he kind of saved me from all my anxiety. But then turns out that the guy is hiding a Seiko Willard in his drawer at home that he's had for years and years. I mean, what is the chances of that? It's like the watch gods aligning specifically for us two to meet in hospital. At least that's the way I like to look at it. So, you know, thanks again, Keith, for letting me do this for you. And I'm sure we'll be speaking very soon about what we're going to do with this particular watch. Also, guys, so in light of having the original Willard, I have to take that opportunity to compare it to the steel drive Willard that is all over the internet, all over YouTube. Certainly, this is like an £80 watch. It's incredible for what you get. I've owned this personally for quite a long time because I could never afford one of the genuine ones. So it's going to be epic to put the two together, show the differences and show what they've got right and what they might not have got right, and whether this is worth the £80. Well, it is worth the £80, believe you me. But whether you think it's a good homage to this. That video is going to go out on my second channel. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. There's going to be a link in the description box. It's My Watch Reviews. I need more of you over there. I've only got 1,200 subscribers. I've got nearly 50,000 of you in this group. I really hope that some of you join over there. It's not just, you know, homage watches I'm reviewing some of my own personal collection of vintage watches or unusual watches, just showing you the stories behind them, how I've restored them, if I've restored them, and a few obviously sponsored videos at the same time. So head over there, click the like, click the subscribe and all those sort of things, and I'll be your best friend for life. How about that? So catch us very soon in the next video. I will now start recording that Zenith. Of course, I did the poll, so the Zenith will be next for me on the bench. Whether it's the next on the channel remains to be seen, because it does depend on what's wrong with the Zenith, whether I can fix it, or whether I need to wait for parts. So there could be other videos in between. 2023, I want to see growth. I want to see more of you subscribe and comment. So I'm going to try and lay down as many videos as I possibly can for you to all enjoy. So see you soon, and Happy New Year to you all if you're watching this as it's gone out. Bye for now.